Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission by Victoria of her horse Vinny. Vinny's a 12-year-old quarter horse. She's owned him for a couple of years and just started in this work a couple of months ago. So we can see on the lunge line here, if we look behind the saddle there, we can see how his back is dipped. And that's what we want to look for on horses. You know, if a horse continues like that and the back continues to go down, you'll end up with kissing spine in time and a horse that's unrideable. So you're well on your way to getting that straightened out by starting this work. It's a pretty good walk here starting off. I'd like to see him a little more active, but this is not too bad. Just continue to try to send him on a little bit. Good. When he starts to stretch down, it looks good. Looks like he has accepted the contact with the shambone pretty well. Obviously, still raises his head when he trots off there. But back to the walk, that looks good in the walk. And once again, don't be afraid of the horse going into the trot. If you push him a little bit in the walk, it's very normal for the horse to try to give you a bad trot rather than a good walk, or a bad trot rather than a good canter, things like that, you know. So what we want to do is just keep pushing him. Don't be afraid of him breaking a little bit, just like he did there, and you just ask him right back to the walk, and usually you'll have a better, more active walk when you do. But if we're afraid to push them at all, then we're not going to get anything at all. So that's good. Look how good that stretch is starting to come in the walk there. That's good, though he lost a little rhythm there, but that's all right. Obviously came back up just a little bit. Now, this horse looks to me like he's probably at about the point where he could start just tightening that shambone just a little bit. Not a whole lot, just a little bit more, maybe a hole more than what you have it right there, so he can't get up quite so high now that he's accepted this, and that will help him stretch out a little sooner. So just a little bit tighter with the side, with the shambone rather. Not a whole lot, though that walk is starting to look pretty good right there. And you can see how it changes. Once again, if you see the underside of the neck very thick, that tells us he's pulling with the shoulders there. That's what causes horses to become ewe-necked, as they pull with their shoulders rather than working over their top line. Though that walk is coming quite nicely now, it's getting quite fluid. Try to keep the slack out of your reins just a little bit more there. Your contact with the rein, that is. We want to have a constant, just unbroken line to the mouth of the horse, just like we do when we ride. So the more slack we have in the rein, the more it allows him to do whatever he feels like doing. And also it can be dangerous, and you get too much slack, suddenly the horse takes off, and they can pull you right off of your feet if they get that momentum going. But this is quite good. I'm not seeing anything terribly wrong with any of this. You're certainly on track to getting the right stuff done. Just try to move him away, as you said. You know, you're having a little difficulty with him moving off your leg. Well, same thing here in the lunge line. See, he's kind of crowding you, and you want to be really careful about letting that slack happen, because if he steps a foot over that, then you can be in trouble. Now he's got the line between his legs. So always trying to keep the slack out of that rein. So got to a pretty good place in that walk there. As I said, I would have just tightened that shambone just a little bit. It's a little too high now that he's used to it. And same thing here, he's kind of backing you off a little bit, so you need to send him on a little bit with the whip there. That's a good stretch, though, that he gets to there. But for the beginning stages of what you're doing here, this actually looks quite good, and by just tightening that shambone a little bit. So you just don't want him to be able to get his head all the way up, which he can kind of do here. So that's why we want to tighten that shambone just a little bit, as long as we're sure the horse isn't overreacting to it. And it certainly does not look like this horse is doing that, so that's good. So once again, remember, there are 3 places that we can ever tap the horse with the whip on the lunge line. That is right where your leg would be. And when we want the horse to move away from us, that's what we want to do. So as I tell everyone, you need to practice with the whip, because it's a very important part of being able to train horses. If you can't tap the horse with the whip when you need to, you have nothing to really back it up with. You don't even have your legs there when you're lunging. So it's very important to become accurate with the whip. So when he comes in on, like he's doing here, see, you're kind of backing away from him. That makes him, he's kind of lunging you rather than you lunging him. You want to always be stepping forward towards the horse. And once again, try to keep that slack out of the lines. So make him a little more active, keep the slack out of the line, tighten the shambone just a little bit, and try to send him on a little more. So being a little more accurate with that whip when he comes in on you, try to run that lash out and tap him right where your leg would be on the side. So you see how he's kind of pulling his shoulders outside the circle. His ends are kind of on 2 different circles. And this circle, of course, is too small for him. So walk a little more actively with the horse as you lunge, but also get after him a little bit more with the whip, you know, so he has a little more respect for you and stops crowding you. And that will solve a lot of the difficulty you have when you're riding the horse. So this trot just needs to be sent on a little bit. It's just not quite active enough. As you can see how the hind legs kind of fall out the back there as he goes around those sharp turns there like that, and it's not really enough. So this isn't really even a trot to me. This is kind of a jog. So we want to just send him on a lot more actively than you're doing here. And as I said before, we must be very accurate with the whip. So if you're not very good with it, I highly suggest you practice with it away from the horse. Find yourself a target that's about the height of where you would tap the horse, which is in that fleshy area of the buttocks above the hocks, or directly to the side. So those are all about the same distance, maybe 3.5, 4 feet up, something like that. Pick yourself a target on a tree and practice with it until you can touch those spots. Pretty good walk here. It's a little bit slow, but he's stretching nicely there. So when he does that, now if we can just get it to swing a little bit more, we'll get a little more over the top line and he'll develop a little more. Same thing here. Don't let him crowd you so much. You need to just get more of a sense of stretching yourself up when you lunge and just being a more powerful sort of source, so to speak, that the horse is a little more respectful of than he is. If you see how he's pulling his head to the outside here, that's where you need more contact there, bring him around, and that's when you want to send him on. So every time the horse's head gets out of position, bending to the outside too much or his hindquarters come in too much, it's all the same thing. Send him out and away from your inside leg, or rein in this case, or whip rather. And just looking at that canter there, yes, we could see that if you were to canter this horse, it would be quite disconnected. So he's got quite a ways to go. See, that's not a good canter there at all. He's just kind of pulling his shoulders up. And of course, the circle is too small. So the biggest thing we need to get you doing is getting this horse working a little more consistently on a little more consistently bigger circle. That's, about a 20-meter circle is about as small as we should ever be lunging a horse on. So 20 to 30 meters is about what we're looking for. So sometimes in order to do that, if we have to discipline a horse like this one, you have to just walk with them quite a bit faster than you're doing when the horse got into a trot. So same thing here, just not enough contact. So remember what we're trying to do on the lunge line is teach the horse to go into that outside rein. So we want him to push away from the inside, that is towards the outside, just like when we ride. That's why you're having trouble when you ride. Same issue. He's falling in around your leg and not moving away from it enough. The same thing here, just way too much slack in the rein. Work to take that slack out. As soon as you get a little contact there and actually keep it, you see how he starts to stretch. So that's what we want to see. So as you push him out away from you with the whip, he goes into the contact with the bridle. And that will help you get him over his back. But once again, not a bad start for all this. You're certainly on track, and I love the fact that he's accepted the shambone so well. So you're over one of the biggest humps there. You just need to be able to just tighten it now a little bit. Better walk there. We see how, and just watch how the neck changes as he stretches down. And always pay attention to the effect that what you're doing is having on the horse. When we see that bottom part of the neck thicken up, that tells you he's pulling with his shoulders. And look, as he goes down, you can clearly see how much better the horse's walk is, like he's going someplace. The further down he stretches, the hind legs come deeper under the body. Remember, the only thing you can really change in a horse is what the hind legs are doing. The front legs are all in a fixed position. So getting the horse to change by coming deeper under his body is what we have to do to balance him. So many people today think that their horses are balanced when in fact all they're doing is just going extremely, extremely slowly. So that gives them the false impression that the horse is in balance. But as soon as they would take those same horses and try to gallop or something like that, or even trot in an open, more lengthened stride, the horses will tend to look like they're going to fall on their heads. There, now that's a good walk. I love where he gets to right there. Once again, just try to keep that slack out of the rein. And same thing here. See how he's really kind of lunging you? He keeps crowding you. So you need to just really be much more active with that whip. I'm not suggesting that you beat the horse half to death with it, but you've got to be able to touch him with it. So a little more active touch with that once again. Same thing here. He starts cantering and crowding you. So remember, the most important thing when you lunge a horse, the first thing the horse has to learn is to stay out at the end of the lunge line so that you can maintain contact. So when we start a horse lunging, we don't worry about anything else except that. If the horse breaks into a canter, even gets a little fractious or whatever, it's okay. We must teach him to move off of the whip, whether it's in a canter or whatever else. And then when you come back, then you'll be able to control him. Because right now what he's doing is he keeps doing that, which is he keeps coming in. So right as he dove in at you there, you should have been using your whip, run that lash out and tap him. Right, as I said, either in the fleshy area of the buttocks or right where your leg would go below the saddle. And that's why you can't really get any rhythm, because he's not really moving away from you. So he just keeps cutting around that corner. See how you backed up from him a little bit? That's what you never want to do. Because remember, if you're backing away from the horse, then the horse is lunging you, as you're doing right there. See, you're yielding your body to his, which means he's lunging you, not the other way around. So you must always hold your ground, so to speak, unless it's some emergency, but make him move away from you. And that's why he ends up spinning on you like that. You start to get a little bit too far ahead of his eye, and he's not really being responsive enough to the whip. So first things first. So remember, first thing is that the horse will move out away from you. So don't worry if he breaks into the trot, breaks into the canter. That doesn't matter. We've just got to get him to move out of the end of the line. And then we can start to control everything else. But we have to have that. The horse must move to the end of the line away from your whip, which would be like your leg if you were riding. So that you'll have a lot less trouble when you ride if you get this straightened out on the lunge line. He starts having more respect for you and respect for the whip when you touch him and you are able to move him out. So remember, correct lunging is just riding from the ground. All the same things apply. We want to have a contact with the horse's mouth, consistent, light contact. And we want to move the horse ahead of our leg, which in this case is the whip. There are good stretch there, but not active enough. So he's getting a pretty good stretch at times, but because we're not keeping him active enough and consistent in the contact, it's just kind of, we have moments and not so good moments. So this is getting a little better here. He's starting to stretch. It's just too slow. So even this is, we need to send him on from this so he gets a little more swing in his stride. So that's how you want your contact, where you have it right now. Now you have a nice triangle formed by your body and the rein in your right hand and the whip in your left. That's how we want to keep it all the time and never let him back you up, like a boxer getting you against the ropes. We've got to move him into the ropes, so to speak. All right, to the riding work here. Pretty good walk starting off, considering how he looked on the lunge line. In some ways, this is almost better than he was on the lunge, and that's just due to your inconsistencies in your lunging technique. This is quite a nice swinging walk starting off. You could be stretching a little deeper, but this is not bad at all. Certainly a good place. I love how he responds to your leg there and starts to swing. So that's more like what we need to see on the lunge line, as I said. And once you establish him moving off the whip a little more, you're going to find that everything else is a lot easier in terms of when you're riding him to do the same things. So just here in this walk, you have a nice soft contact. Just about what you're doing is really quite nice. Just keep your contact consistent and just soften him. And as he goes down, the rein becomes lighter. That's simply all we're looking for the horse to teach the horse to look and seek for that light contact with the bridle. That's why we never want to be pulling back against the horse, as we see so many people doing these days. It's very sad to see all these upper level dressage horses, and every one of them practically the curb rein is straight back on, or the people are keeping, bracing on the horse's mouth against the curb rein throughout the entire test. Well, that's why we see so many horses swishing their tails and pinning their ears back, because they're quite irritated, because it's just like driving your car. You can't put on the brake and the gas at the same time. You can put on one, take one off, and put one on, like when you pump the brake a little bit, and that's how we need to ride a horse. Now this walk is coming quite nicely. Now that's starting to stretch deeper, and look what the effect that this has on the back end of the horse. As soon as you get him to stretch deeper, that track becomes deeper under the body. And remember, that's what we're riding. We're riding the horse always from the back to the front. It's the back end that we can change. In other words, its ability to compress. The front end is just always the same. Now, of course, through this correct work, what's going to happen is this horse is going to get a much more uphill stance. You can tell that this horse has never been trained correctly. You see the big dip behind the saddle there that you can clearly see when you come around into silhouette there. And you can see how dropped his back is. And this is how horses get so damaged. Now, that's a good walk there, starting there. Really nice. That's starting to swing quite nicely. You have a good leg position and upper body position. I'm not seeing anything that needs correcting there for the most part. Saddle seems to fit you and him pretty well. It's allowing your heel to hang under your hip, so that's where we want it to be. You could, if anything, just stretch yourself up a little bit, but really this is quite good. Just making him a little more active with your legs. Now remember, of course, we never want to apply any aid and just clamp it on the horse. So the legs are always used intermittently. That is, we put them on, get a response. If we don't get a response, the next time we ask a little stronger. And the next time we'd back it up with a whip a little here, a little bit. I don't see you riding with a dressage whip. Now that could also be Now, I don't know if you're not doing that because he is over-responsive to a whip or something like that. Doesn't look like he would be. But you do want to start riding with a dressage whip, because if you're having trouble moving the horse off your leg, if he doesn't move off of it, what are you going to do? If you don't have a whip, you're going to have to just kick and pound. And that's never a good thing. We never want to touch the horse with our legs anything more than the lightest little impulse. And then if the horse doesn't respond, we back it up with the whip a little bit. But if we keep kicking and kicking harder and harder, the horse is just going to go dead to your leg. This is quite a nice walk, though, coming here. I think for just starting this work for a few months, you're doing a great job here. I couldn't be happier with what I see. Pretty good swinging walk. He could still be a little bit deeper in that, but it's certainly nice and active. It's starting to come forward. And it's starting to have some rhythm, which was the biggest problem with your lunge line work, is it never really got into a good rhythm. He was always slowing down and coming in at you on the lunge line, that sort of thing, and changing pace. So if we can't keep the horse on a regular circle that's consistent, that's how we tell whether the work we're doing is having a good effect upon the horse or not. So if we lose the rhythm or we lose the position of the back, we know we have to go back to a deeper stretch and just send the horse forward again. Remember, when I say forward, the word forward means to engage forward under the body with the hind legs. It does not mean to run forward in a straight line. So that's a concept that's very confused in people's minds sometimes. It's now, not to say that some horses that are very inactive and they're hollow, we just have to get them going as best we can and engage them as best we can. But when we talk about forward, we really mean to engage straight forward under the body. Quite a nice walk here. Could still be just, there you go. That's where you want him. More there, seeks. And notice how the lower his head goes, the faster the horse goes, and the longer and more swinging the stride is, because there's nothing interfering with him. Remember, that's what we're doing here, is we're simply showing the horse how to put its body in a frame or posture that allows him to most easily do the job of carrying the weight of a rider over a distance. Quite good here. I like how soft his neck is becoming. Yeah, that's really quite nice. And the walk is swing could be a little more active right here, but I really like how quiet your hands are. Once you realize that, it doesn't take a Herculean feat of strength to train a horse. If that's what you think, you're very much on the wrong track. But this is really good. Your hands are quite light. If anything, now do just be aware that sometimes you seem like you're a little bit on your fingertips. Be sure and keep your fingers rounded, folks, because I have and even injured one of my own fingers one time, the horse stopping suddenly or something, and my finger jamming into the neck of the horse. So just be careful about having your fingers a little too open. Should feel like you have a little ball in the center of your palm of your hand when you hold the reins correctly. Pretty good leg yield here, and this is what he needs to do a lot of, is these leg yields, to help you with the issue of being able to stay out in a circle. And remember, the leg yield is the first exercise that we train a horse to do, because if we don't do a leg yield, we can't actually even really circle, because a circle is dependent on us being able to push the horse out onto the size of the circle that we want. So next time, I'd love to see you riding in a dressage whip, though this walk is coming really nicely now. And the beauty is to remember, if you're having difficulty with the trot and you're not even cantering work yet, don't worry about it. Just do more work, walk in the walk. If you can get the walk corrected in time, you'll be able to correct the trot. But what we don't want to do, so many people think they have to run the gears every day on the horse, that they have to walk, trot, and canter every horse every day. Nothing could be further than the truth. In other words, you only want to ride the horse in the gaits that you can get the horse over its back. And if that's only the walk, then just spend a lot of time in the walk getting the horse over the back, and the horse will develop. I've rehabbed a lot of horses, and ones that simply couldn't trot for months on end. And those horses developed quite well once I learned how to get them over their backs. I realized that you don't have to be in a trot to develop a horse. So it's very important that we get one thing right before we go to the next. So if you put everything in the order that it's coming, you're always at this level until this horse is consistently over its back and has developed a top line. You're going to lunge it every day before you ride. It's always going to be your procedure. Then you're simply going to get on, ride the walk until you can get the horse over its back. And if you can, you're going to try the trot work. But if you can't get the horse over its back in the trot, you're simply going to come back to the walk and re-stretch. So whenever we hit a wall, we always go back to what came before. Never try to push your way through the wall, so to speak, because you can't force anything good out of a horse. You can't force a horse to have good contact with the bridle. The more force you use, the worse the contact will become. So pretty good walk here. So as I said, don't worry about it. If you can get him in the walk and you can't in any other gait, just walk. do the trot, do the lunge work, and in time, you just keep coming back and trying. I usually tell people like this level, try your canter once every couple of weeks until it starts feeling better. I can tell you this horse's canter wouldn't be good from what I saw on the lunge line. It was very lumbering and very hollow, his head up in the air. So we don't want to do any of that for quite some time with this horse. So once again, I wouldn't go back to cantering this horse till he's really consistent over his back in the walk and trot. And that's even on the lunge line. Because a horse like this is that hollow in the canter, you just really have to build the muscle in the walk and trot before you try cantering again. If you read the old Spanish riding school manual, and they suggested they would ride their horses for a full year in walk and trot before they ever cantered them, and then you come to a canter, and it's good. But I don't put a time frame on it, but just as simply you have to have the horse over its back in the walk and trot before you canter. Now, once in a while, I do see a horse that canters better than it trots. It's usually a big, heavy kind of horse, these draft crosses and things like that, because essentially those horses weren't made to trot. So sometimes they canter better than they do the trot. And with those cases, it's okay to canter. So that's our whole rule. Can we get the horse over its back in whatever gait we're asking it to work in? But once again, you're doing a great job for just starting this work a couple of months. Once again, look in silhouette as you come around there, how that whole dip in the saddle there in the horse's back. That's where the spine has actually dropped. And if that were to have continued, it would turn into kissing spine in time because the back just becomes so dropped that the top of the vertebrae start to rub together there. So very good work in the walk. I would still like to see him just a little bit longer, but you really got him to a pretty good place there. Now, as we come to the trot, we see he's immediately hollow in the trot. You can see that he's quite ewe-necked there and sort of drops his back out from underneath you to start with. But once again, you don't want to try to force the horse to stay in a good frame when you make those transitions. We never worry about what the horse is doing between the gaits until we can really get the horse over its back. I see so many horses irritated from that. So get the horse right in the walk, then just make whatever transition you can make to the trot, get it as right as you can. And in time, the transitions will happen all by themselves. Now he's starting to come a little bit more forward here. It's not a bad trot. He just still, there you go. As he starts to go down, once again, you'll see the same thing here when we do the trot work. As his neck stretches further down, the hind legs will swing deeper under the body, and the horse will have a greater impression of unison and harmony between the two ends of the horse. When a horse is hollow, it kind of looks like two men in a horse suit. They're not working together. Get an eye for those diagonal pairs. That is, for instance, the inside hind and outside foreleg. They should always swing exactly together. We look for that all the time. Watch upper level dressage horses, especially when they go to do half passes. The horses that are hollow always become very disconnected. That is, the unison between the front leg and the back leg becomes very disconnected when they try to do half passes. And the horse will have a very hard time in the half pass because it can't get its leg around. The horse needs to be in that position that is deeper under the body so it can step under and through. This trot's starting to look a little better here, though. Now, the other thing I would say is that, there you go, that's starting to look a little better. Once he really gets stretching in the shambone on the lunge line, you get that a little tighter and you get your circles and everything going a little more consistently. It's perfectly all right to ride a little bit if you're having trouble getting the horse to stretch in the shambone once you get him to do it on the lunge line. There's no danger in that whatsoever, especially riding in a ring like this. Remember, the beauty of the shambone, it just lets the horse stretch down. And if you haven't tightened it too much, which you have not done, looking at the other video, you're not going to have a problem with his balance or anything. We want to be careful anytime anything is restricting the movement of the neck, because if a horse does start to fall, it needs to be able to bring its head and neck up. So we never want any of those kind of things to be so tight that they restrict the horse from at least bringing its head up to about the level there it is now. But I just felt like it could be a little bit shorter. So that was a good call to come back to the walk there because we weren't really getting him around enough over his back. So that's what you want to do. Don't try to fight your way through it. Within a couple of minutes, if you haven't gotten the horse stretching in the trot, just like you did there, just come back to the walk and stretch him deeper. In other words, you're coming back and explaining, no, what you were doing was not what I wanted you to do. I want you to stretch deeper. And so coming back to the step that happened before, that is always what we want to do. Go back rather than trying to push through the wall. In many cases, it's simply a matter of strength. The horse simply is not strong enough to do what we ask them to do. So we've got to be sure we're recognizing that. And usually that's the case. Horses that have been hollow a long time. Now look at this walk. Now that's where I want to walk, down like that. That was really good. You had a couple of really nice moments there. Try to send him on so he gets even more swing. This is getting lower and more active. So that's simply all you have to know. If you keep coming back to this walk and getting him stretching deeper and deeper, and he's still got has a little ways to go here in the walk. So I wouldn't have expected the trot to be very good. And remember, the quarter horses are kind of known for being kind of short in their step, but this one actually has quite a nice hind leg. I think when you get this horse over its back, it's going to be a really nice moving horse. You know, and the worst horses in the world, unfortunately, a lot of the older quarter horses. Now, once again, look at the dip as you see coming across in silhouette behind the saddle. That's all going to improve. And you see how those hips are what I call tented. There's a hunter bump there. Once again, that's the beginning of kissing spine. If that were to continue like that, you would end up laming the horse by virtue of that spine interference there behind the saddle. So what I'm talking about is like right there on top of the croup, you see how short those muscles are. Some people call that a hunter's bump. They used to, as if that was something desirable. I call it a bad riding bump. It simply shows you a horse that has never been developed correctly. As I said, you know, I don't have to see a horse even go under saddle to tell you exactly how it's gonna go if I see it's muscling. So when you see a horse like that, his back is dropped, and you see that sort of how would we call it, half a football-sized lump there on his croup. That tells us he's been going in very shortened strides and never really working over his back. So not a bad trot here, just not quite stretching enough. Certainly in the right direction. I like what you're doing with you're never trying to force him onto the bridle or anything like that. That's exactly what you want to do. The beauty is once we teach them to stretch on the lunge line, it's a position that feels very comfortable to them. And that's the only place they'll ever get in the zone, unless you might have an exhausted horse working some other way and it seems kind of relaxed, but you don't want to have to go through that every day with a horse that you have to exhaust them every day to get calmness. We shouldn't have to do that. So I'm not seeing anything wrong here with what you're doing. You're doing quite a nice job of sending him on, keeping your contact pretty consistent, though it could be a little more. See, the outside reins tends to be a little bit looser than the inside rein. There you go. Then he starts to stretch. So it's every time you get that another inch deeper in the stretch, how much better he looks and how much deeper the stride. And you start to see a little spring in his step. Once again, when the horse is correct, you'll be working over its back. The hock, if you put a white dot in the center of the hock, where the hock is there on the back leg, it should make a perfect circle. And you see, if you looked at this horse right now, you can see it makes kind of an ellipse. And the hind leg goes way behind the body before it starts back up. So one of the most important things that we see is the hind leg getting quicker to the ground coming forward. That's getting a little better there. Now also, same thing, I would like to see you in your next video starting to add some leg yields in the trot a little more. Just from the center line to the outside, that's where we always want to start. And once again, that was about right. Coming back to the walk, he felt like he wasn't really getting as stretched as you want him to do. And that's what you want to do. You want to try it, see if you can get there. And if you can't get there, just what you're doing here, coming back to the walk and reestablishing it in the walk. It takes a lot of patience and to go through this work with horses. And that being the biggest problem. Most people who've been riding a few years and can walk, trot, and canter can actually ride well enough to train their horses if they only knew a system of how to go about doing it. And a system that isn't based on physical force and strength, which we see so many people doing. We see so many people going to training with trainers, and then a month later they can't ride their horse because the trainer has so overcomplicated it and it has it held against their hands. Well, the students can never ride like that. As I said, it takes years to be able to ride a horse badly, that badly where you can hold them against your hands and this sort of thing. So we see so many riders sidelined by their trainers, and in many cases forever, because they can never learn to ride like that. And in many cases, they don't want to ride like that. It feels instinctively wrong for them to be fighting with the animals, which is something we never want to do. Should never be part of what we do with riding horses. So we just need to get this swing in the walk. Here I would send him on just a little bit more. So you send him forward into that contact, just like you do when you're lunging. You have a couple of nice moments coming up here when he starts to stretch a little deeper. Like right there. That's what we want to see all the time. You can see how even for that split second, he started looking a little springier. So that's what we have to keep working for to get that deeper. We can see at this level, he's just kind of pulling himself. Look how he stabs the front legs into the ground, kind of pulls himself forward. So once again, not a lot of this, just test it in the trot every day that you ride. And I think he's far enough along that you could ride this horse, more than once a week. I do it a couple of times a week or at least, and start to develop him a little more. That will help a great deal. But your walk work is good. So, you could even walk this horse almost every day because your walk work is good. So maybe that's a strategy. Lunge him and then ride him and do a lot of walk work. And don't even bother to trot, till every third day or something. This walk is looking quite nice and stretching here. So great job for your first attempt at this. I think you're doing a wonderful job for only done it a couple of months. Keep up the good work. And I look forward to seeing you next time. This has been Will Faerber from Art to Ride, with our friend Victoria here with her horse Vinny. Good work. Just needs to get everything stretching a little deeper, but I love how calmly you're going about everything. Your position looks good, your contact with the reins looks good, everything is just coming along absolutely beautifully. So keep up the good work and get him a little deeper, and it's all going to develop beautifully.